So as we come together once again for Holy Week, we've reached Thursday, which is traditionally in the church referred to as Maundy Thursday. Well, it's a strange term, and not a lot of people know why it's called Maundy Thursday. Maundy is actually a shortened version of a longer Latin term, the Mandatum Novum. And that refers to the new commandment or the new mandate. And the reference comes specifically from John chapter 13. And in John chapter 13, Jesus has just gotten done with the Last Supper with his disciples prior to going to the cross. And he has just given them one of the biggest expressions of love that you can give, being the Son of God, in taking on the form of a servant. And he washes their feet. And following this, and as Judas departs from them to go and betray him, we read this in John chapter 13, starting at verse 34. A new commandment I give you, that you love one another just as I have loved you. You also are to love one another. By this, all people will know that you are my disciples if you have love for one another. Well, it's an interesting thing to think about that he calls this a new commandment, because throughout the scriptures, from Genesis all the way up until now, we see a God who loves. We see a God who calls us to love him with all of our heart and soul and mind and strength. And we see him calling us to love our neighbor as ourselves. So it's curious to me why this is called a new commandment by Jesus. And I think the best thing that I can come up with is that it's a commandment that's given by Jesus in such a way that gives a physical manifestation of love through serving, especially serving those who will turn from you. Because if we think about what Jesus has done here, as he's washed the disciples' feet, not only did he wash the 11 disciples' feet, but he also washed the feet of the one who would betray him. He calls it a new commandment of love as the betrayer goes and he leaves the scene. You see, Jesus didn't exclude Judas from the experience of being served through foot washing. And so as we consider today the commandment of love that God gives us as the church, it is not only to love those whom are easy to love within the church, but it is also to love those who are difficult to love, who may even betray us. Is to love a world that will turn its back on God despite the witness of God through creation and through his word and through the witness of his people that are going to turn from him. We are still called to love. That this is going to be the expression that Jesus says of knowing what marks the church is loving one another. There's an expression that I have that my students who have heard me teach in student ministry have heard. I've preached it from the pulpit before, and it's something that I try to live by. Love people for what they are. Don't hate them for what they're not. And what I mean by that is, for every human being who walks the face of the earth, there is something that makes them lovable. The biggest thing that makes them lovable is that they're created in the image of God. And there are plenty of reasons to hate people, especially me, especially you. There are reasons that we can find to hate one another if we really try. But if we start with the aiming point of loving one another because we are created in the image of God, there will also be other things that we see in people that we will see that make them lovable. So on this Maundy Thursday, with the Mandatum Novum, this new mandate to love one another, can I encourage you today to find the ways that you can love one another, not only within the church, but to love those who are enemies of the cross in order that they might come into a saving relationship with Jesus Christ.